Good evening. Welcome to our fifth session on My Masterpiece, My Family. And, I'm just going to begin tonight saying something really blunt. I don't know about all of you, but I presume that sometimes when you hear a lot of preachers or a lot of priests telling you, how to do things simply, and as long as you just do God's will and everything in your marriage is going to be just fine and you're never going to have problems and everything, I'm sure sometimes you might be tempted to kind of roll your eyes and say, what do you guys know about marriage anyway? So I'm just going to say it straight up. If you ever hear a priest or a preacher saying something like, as long as you just follow these steps and you do God's will, everything's going to be okay and you're never going to have problems, that man is a liar. Straight up. Okay? So that much right off the chest. And that's why, I think we need to appreciate our Holy Father Pope Francis, because he says things pretty clearly. He says, in marriage is not easy. In fact, there's a joke that I actually tell to young couples that are getting ready to get married. When I'm preparing them, I say, the definition of marriage is a sacrament where one man and one woman, under the grace of God, become united and receive special gifts so as not to be able to kill each other. And it's obviously something I say tongue-in-cheek, but there's some truth to it. So the Holy Father recognizes family is difficult, life is difficult. Even if we're doing everything right, life a lot of times is going to throw us some curveballs. These are things that God allows. And the main thing is, family is here to help us to grow from these experiences. So Pope Francis gives us 4 different kinds of difficult life experiences that are pretty much common to everybody. There are obviously going to be other ones that he doesn't talk about, but right now let's just focus on the big 4. The first one is going to be, a lot of families deal with a very real issue called poverty. Again, in the church, it can be a temptation for us as priests to talk to you about your duties. You need to go to Mass, you need to make time to go to Mass, you need to give money to the church, you need to contribute, all these things. Those things are true. Those are all things that we tell you to do because they are helpful for you as much as they are for us. However, we also recognize that a lot of times life is difficult. What do you do when you don't have what it takes to make ends meet? Well, those are things that God is going to allow so that you can grow in your trust, in your relationships with each other, by overcoming these difficulties. What are the different kinds of poverty? Well, I more or less was talking about financial poverty is definitely going to be one. You can have financial poverty, you can have poverty in the terms of health. If I have poor health, that is definitely a form of poverty. Another form of poverty, one that Mother Teresa used to speak a lot about, is the poverty of love. When there is a person who isn't loved or doesn't feel loved, or where there's a lack of love in a household, that is a true and it's a very tragic form of poverty. Poverty of work. Poverty of work obviously is closely associated with poverty financially, but it's more than that. The sense of dignity, the sense of being able to create a living for a family, it's an intrinsic right. It's something we feel in our bones. And when we don't have opportunity, when we don't have the possibility, or we feel we don't have that possibility, it's a true form of poverty. But poverty in the sense of a healthy environment for a family. For example, if we grow up in a neighborhood and everywhere our kids go, we feel like our kids are going out into a minefield. Everywhere we look, there's going to be drugs, there's going to be violence, there's going to be bad examples, there's going to be pitfalls of every sort, and we get this mentality of, I've got to watch over my kids, or else because every time they go anywhere, who knows, they might fall into sin, or they may get hurt or something. That's a real kind of a form of poverty when there's not a kind of safe and healthy environment. And finally, the poverty, which is related, of simply a lack of good example, maybe the lack of good example within our own family. All of these are different kinds of poverty, but all of them are basically something that is lacking that should be there, that we need, and that is missing, and we have to find a way to cope with it. Well, the church knows that we have these difficulties. And these are things that, like we said earlier, God allows. You know, and we don't always know the reason why God allows. We know fundamentally the basic reason, but the specific reason for you, why is God allowing this cross in your life? A lot of times we don't know what to say to you. God alone knows. But there's one bit of advice that I actually just heard it a few days ago. It was an expression from a very beautiful married guy that I know. He's a person he was widowed a few years ago. He's 96 years old. He's actually a New Yorker, but he lives in Ohio now. And, you know, I probably have never seen anyone or any couple that was so in love with each other. I hadn't seen them probably for 15 years now, but I remember when I used to visit them. This couple, they were in their 70s or 80s at the time, and they were tremendously in love with each other. And clearly right up until the day when the wife died. Well, this New York fellow that I was talking to on the phone, he was still remaining with such a good, upbeat sense of humor about life. And he said, you know, Father, when I was young, you know, I realized very quickly, everything that can possibly happen to me in life, everything that there is, it's either a gift from God, or B, it's something that God allows. And if you go through life with that recognition, no matter what my cross, no matter what my struggle, it's either A, a gift from God that He gave me for a reason, or B, something that He's allowing in my life for a reason. It does give us great peace. It gives us great confidence. It gives us great hope. It gives meaning to our suffering. Does that mean the suffering just goes away? No. God a lot of the times allows us to continue in a kind of a poverty or suffering that we don't really know all the reasons why. But when we do have that sense of hope, that sense of faith that says, God is either giving this to me or He's allowing it to me for a reason, for my good, then that does give us a new kind of a purpose to be able to carry on. Secondly, within the family we encounter sickness. Obviously, we're always going to encounter sickness to a greater or lesser extent. Little kids growing up get sick, sometimes seriously so, sometimes even to the death. Parents who get old also get elderly and sick. Sickness is something that God allows for a reason. Because within the family, if we are a community of love, well, what happens? If somebody is in need, then the other ones close ranks and they help out. I remember hearing the priestly memoirs of one of our priests, who was a Spanish priest, possibly one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my life. The guy is brilliant. And apparently his whole family is like that. All of his brothers and sisters are all doctors and lawyers and intellectuals and what have you. All of these guys in this house, strong character, strong intellect, you know, everyone has their opinion and they defend it to the death kind of a thing. And what happened? They had several kids, and then the last child comes. Well, the last child is mentally, kind of incapacitated. I don't remember what the particular case was, but she's a special needs child. And he said, the greatest gift that God ever gave to our family was this little girl. He says, because otherwise we would have been like an atomic bomb with all these strong intellects and strong opinions clashing all the time. But he said, when she came into our family, she brought us all together. She made us focus on each other. She made us forget about ourselves. And she became the greatest gift because this little girl, who wasn't all there intellectually, what did she know? She knew how to love. She knew she loved to feel loved. She was so simple. She brought joy to the family. And she was the greatest gift that God could have ever given to us. The same thing applies in sickness. When there's somebody in need, within a family, if there's a family member, if 7 people in the family are perfectly healthy and athletic and maybe even winning awards and medals and stuff, and one person in the family is sick, do you say that family is doing well? No. You say that family, they close ranks. We know as long as one person in our family is in need, all of us in a certain sense are in need. All of us are affected. All of us close ranks and help out that family member, at least by prayer, at least by love, at least by our signs of affection. And that is something very proper and beautiful to family life. something probably most people don't even realize, the church has a long history, obviously, dealing with sick people. Do you know where the idea of the hospital came from? It was invented by the church. Hospitals, as we know them, were invented by the church. And the idea of a public hospital, a place that anybody could come to, not just some king or some extravagantly wealthy person, the idea of public access to affordable health care, where did that come from? From some politician? From some party? No. That came from the Catholic Church. The idea of hospitals taking in began with pilgrims, people on long journeys who would get hurt or get sicknesses or whatever and would need to recover. That's where the idea of a hospital came from. The third great trial, if you want, cross that families face, that all people face, is death. And death, we all have to admit it. It causes us to ask the big questions. And death really is probably the one thing that makes us question God more than anything else. And it probably portrays or reveals to us what is the quality of our faith. Because death is so meaningless when we don't have faith. And realistically, why is it so often that we get angry at God? As a priest, I hear this regularly. I haven't been to confession for years, maybe. Well, why not? Well, I prayed for something and God didn't answer my prayer, and I don't understand. I lost my little sister, for example. I don't understand why a good God would allow some little child like that to die. And what do you tell them? There is no human answer to death. There is only the answer of faith. But through faith, through the church, through Christ, death does take on a different meaning. Without faith, what are the fruits of death? Death that shakes us up. Without faith, the fruits are very frequently, it's going to be envy, it's going to be greed, it's going to be, like we said, anger at God, pride, maybe even hatred. How tragic it is, for example, when we see parents who die and leave an inheritance behind, and immediately all of the heirs, the children presumably, start to fight over the inheritance. I say, how does that happen? Well, it happens when death is seen without the eyes of faith, when family is seen really without the eyes of faith. Finally, within our family, we would like to think that our relationships with each other are always going to be perfect, not just outside things like sickness or death or poverty. We would like to think that all of our problems are going to be something from out there. But it's also true that we ourselves are not perfect. The way we act is not perfect, and we're going to hurt each other. We shouldn't. We would hope we don't, but frequently it's going to happen. It happens within all families. One person hurts another, and those things leave wounds. How is it that the family, why does God allow those things within a family? Well, He allows within a family because in the end, family is an opportunity to make a choice. Whenever within any relationship, somebody hurts somebody else, whether it's on purpose or not, there's always a fundamental choice that can be made. Am I going to be selfish or selfless? Am I going to close into myself, or am I going to open up to other people? When we close into ourselves, what happens? We become islands. Families become divided. We can't really talk about a family, for example, when there are 5 people, each one of which is just closed into themselves. Is that a family anymore? Well, biologically, yes. Legally, yes. But in the practice, is it acting like a family? No. It becomes 5 individual people. A family is something different. A family is when those 5 people are united with one life. They all complement each other, they all build each other up, and when one of them messes up, they all forgive when needed. But when there is division, that's Satan's work. Actually C.S. Lewis, in one of his works, The Great Divorce, he had a very interesting depiction of hell. He doesn't have pitchforks or fires or torture or any of those things in hell. What he does have is a bunch of people who choose when they go there to keep separating themselves from everybody else. They choose to live in total isolation because they simply don't like each other's company. They, whenever they're around each other, they just keep noticing all the unpleasantness and how come this other person does things so badly, and the other people just annoy them. So they go further and further away, and they close in more and more and more into themselves. So for C.S. Lewis, in that story, hell is loneliness. Hell is isolation. Hell is closing myself out to the others. And we remember, why did God choose the church? Why did God, or the family? Why did God choose to make families? It's specifically to be the opposite. A family is, first of all, it is an image of the Holy Trinity that has a Father. And in this particular image, it's not a perfect image because instead of having a mother, it has a son. The Father and the Son have that relationship between the two of them. And from that bond of love between the Father and the Son proceeds a third person, which is the Holy Spirit. So God is a relationship. God is about togetherness. And He made human beings in His image and likeness to be relationships of love, to be togetherness, to unite ourselves, to be willing to sacrifice ourselves for each other, and never to be isolated. So let's continue on in our campaign. Let's continue praying for each other, and let's continue building those great families, those environments of love, where each person is going to be esteemed and appreciated. God bless you.